I had the fortunate opportunity to work with public policy when it first started with AQHA, and I remember George Phillips telling me when we first met that in order to be successful in Washington, D.C., you have to establish relationships with members and staff. With nearly 100 new members in this new Congress, we have our work cut out for us. To help make sense and guide the industry through this labyrinth of legislation and regulation in Washington, D.C., is the American Horse Council, which is headed up by their president, Jay Hickey. Jay's a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and obtained his law degree from Georgetown University Law School. Jay Hickey has been president of the American Horse Council since 1993. The American Horse Council includes over 150 equine organizations representing every segment of the horse industry. Jay says there could be as many as 5 pieces of animal welfare legislation introduced in this Congress, also including the possibility of amending the Horse Protection Act. So let's welcome Jay Hickey to give us an update on what's going on in Washington, D.C. Thanks, Jay.
Senator Rubio, I'm bringing my water with me. Well, I thought that maybe we could get through that introduction without bringing up a sore subject. But I suggest, and you know, where's Tom? Is Tom here? Tom and Ward didn't tell me that Russell Harris was going to be on this panel. And I think we ought to change it to Irish welfare from this point on. As you heard, yes, I did indeed go to Notre Dame. I'm very proud of that fact. All I wanted from that damn game was not to be embarrassed. And we got through the kickoff, and we weren't embarrassed, and that was about it. So congratulations. I mean, there was obvious we shouldn't even been on the same field with Alabama. And then we have the situation with Manti Te'o that follows all this, and I'm sure you followed that. I really didn't think that was so strange, because when I was at Notre Dame, which was many, 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 many years ago, I had an imaginary girlfriend too. Now, this was before the internet, and she used to come once a month, and I'm trying to show, you know, not on the internet, she would come once a month in a magazine that me and 1,600 other crazy guys would open and sort of go like this. So, we'll just leave it at that. I didn't think that the situation with poor Manti was that strange. As Ward said, I'm from Washington, D.C., so I want to say, you know, peace and love. There are a lot of issues before Congress, and I'm glad to see now that the President and the House and the Senate are eating together rather than eating each other. We've hit sequestration. We've gone over the cliff this time. We'll see what happens, if anything. The debt limit will be hit in late February, so that's another opportunity to have everybody yelling and screaming at each other. And the continuing resolution, which keeps the federal government open, expires March 31st. Now, there's been some action to try to extend that. But this is a new Congress. Everything that happened last Congress, you start all over, have to introduce all the legislation. But among the bills that are going to be considered by this Congress is equine welfare issues. And it's huge. It's not 5, it's going to be 4. Our issues are going to be front and center, as they were last year, and we've got another bill that's going to be introduced too. We need to self-regulate in all aspects except maybe one. Maybe we've gone too far in one, and we are now over the equine welfare fiscal cliff in that issue. But we expect 4 bills, and if you're not in the spotlight, stay out of the spotlight. You don't want to get caught in that mishmash. And AQHA and the Welfare Coalition is doing a great job to keep you out of it. But there's going to be 4 bills introduced, and they haven't yet. One is a slaughter legislation. One is legislation to prohibit transport of horses in double-deck trucks. Another is the racing legislation involving medication. And the third is the Horse Protection Act. And for those of you who've been involved in any of this, and you see how bad it is, the hearings The media focus, the congressional process is probably worse than the legislation because it's not a fair approach. It's very difficult to deal, particularly with the media. But everybody knows the Slaughter Horse Prevention Act that was introduced by Senator Landrieu and Congressman Burton would prohibit the transport of horses, the slaughter of horses for human consumption. It will be reintroduced again, involves penalties. It authorizes $5 million for enforcement. Last year, the Senate bill had 26 co-sponsors, and the House bill had 158. And currently, there is no federal prohibition on the slaughter of horses. The USDA defunding provision has expired. Right now, if someone wants to open up a facility to slaughter horses, they can do so. And that's the way it is. The House just passed a continuing resolution through September and does not include that defunding provision. So there are several facilities, one in New Mexico, I think, is the furthest along, that have applied for a license to begin the slaughter of horses again. The second, but again, we don't need to discuss the ardor and the difficulty of discussing that and the emotional attachment that bill provides. The second is the Horse Transportation Safety Act, which Senator Mark Kirk introduced last year, and he almost got it passed. And what it would do is say you cannot transport a horse in a double-deck trailer, which sounds reasonable. There are already prohibitions on the book. You can't transport slaughter horses in double-deck trailers, but this would be all. I think there's 2 states that prohibit the transport of horses in double-deck trucks, and you say, why would anybody not be supportive of such a bill? It's because rodeo has been transporting their horses in double-deck trucks for decades without a problem. So the position of the American Horse Council is that we can support this legislation provided there's some language in there to allow rodeo to continue what they do. But that bill has it was prompted by a terrible accident in Senator Kirk's district when he was in the House. He introduced it in the House also. 8 horses of 58 or 38 Belgian horses, and it was a real terrible situation. But the accident was not caused because there were horses in double-deck trailers. The accident was caused because the fellow went through the red light. But that's, again, that'll be back again. The other, and this is a real serious issue and is daily discussed in the racing industry, is the Interstate Horse Racing Improvement Act, introduced by Senator Udall and Congressman Whitfield. What it would do is prohibit the use of performance-enhancing drugs in racing. It would prohibit entering a horse in a race under the influence of a performance-enhancing drug. The bill defines a performance-enhancing drug to be very broad, almost any legislation. Would require all the winners to be tested. The Federal Trade Commission would be the regulator. They would write the regulations. They would enforce the act. And there were numerous hearings held last year, last Congress, I think 5, 1 in the House, or 1 in the Senate and 4 in the House, including a field hearing up in Pennsylvania. And again, those hearings were very, very difficult and often had information that wasn't particularly accurate. But the bill that's probably going to get most of the attention this year is a legislation that Mr. Whitfield introduced at the end of last Congress, just to sort of get everybody thinking about it. And the Horse Protection Act amendments of 2012, which will soon become 2013. The Horse Protection Act prohibits the soaring of horses. If a horse is sore, it cannot be shown, it cannot be sold in a public sale, it cannot be auctioned in a public auction, it cannot be exhibited. Soaring is a practice that would accentuate a horse's gait. Could be application of chemicals, a device, the way that you shoe the horse so that the horse is suffering pain when it moves. And that's how some horses get that big lick, as they say, in the Tennessee walking horse industry. Although the Horse Protection Act applies to all breeds and all showing activities, including quarter horse, it was passed and it focuses on Tennessee walking horses, racking horses, and spotted saddle horses, all capital H's, not horses that can have a accentuated gait, not horses that can rack, not horses that are spotted. Those particular breeds, and that's the way the Department of Agriculture has enforced it. It's aimed at producing, as I say, an exaggerated gait for competition. I suspect that most people in the quarter horse show world don't even know what it says, don't even know what it does, because you don't soar your horses and you don't need to worry about it. Still, it's a problem that has garnered more and more attention. I don't know how many people have seen the videos of a fellow named Jackie McConnell, who was a pretty well-known Tennessee walking horse trainer. I mean, if you see them, it's pretty atrocious what he was doing to those horses. And he really was never found guilty because the Horse Protection Act prohibits a lot of things, but it does not actually prohibit the actual soaring of the horse. So they couldn't get the kind of penalties they wanted for it. But Mr. Whitfield's bill would do the following. It would add a complete ban on the use of action devices, pads, wedges, and hoof bands on a Tennessee walking horse, capital H, a racking horse, capital H, and a spotted saddle horse, capital H. It would take away, those are the breeds that it would affect. There are other changes that would affect other breeds, but again, since other breeds don't soar horses, they don't usually pay attention to the Horse Protection Act, and I suspect that if this bill passed, they wouldn't even know about it. It would end the industry's ability to self-police through these designated qualified persons, horse industry organizations, and require the USDA to set up a licensing system and to hire independent inspectors and focus on hiring accredited veterinarians. It would increase fines and penalties and suspensions from $3,000 to $5,000. It would allow a horse to be prohibited from showing. After the first violation, you could be prohibited, an individual could be prohibited for a year, and going up to after 3, it could be subject to a lifetime ban. The AHC has 2 committees that has been looking at this legislation since it was introduced last October. Our Animal Welfare Committee and our Horse Show Committee, and Ward and Tom serve on both. We also set up a smaller working group to look at this legislation and decide what the position that we should have to recommend to the AHC Board of Trustees. The Horse Protection Act was passed in 1970. It's been in existence for 40 years. Various efforts have been made to deal with this problem, to halt it, but it still continues in not even the entire, certainly walking horse industry, but in a small section. Our concerns with that bill is that any amendment not be overly broad, be limited to the problems that it is intended to solve. It can accomplish its purpose, and it does not adversely affect other show breeds. If we feel that those concerns are answered, the AHC may indeed support that legislation. The American Veterinary Medical Association and the American Association of Equine Practitioners have already come out in support of it. And again, we're looking at it very closely, and it is possible. It raises questions like slippery slope. But slippery slope is an answer to anything. If someone wants to reform something, then you say, well, it's the camel's nose under the tent. That's not a good enough of an answer, really. But we have to be concerned. And if we supported it, if it seems like it's moving in the wrong direction, we would immediately withhold support and then oppose the bill. Just one of the main problems, and particularly the saddlebred industry, the Morgan industry, the hackney, people don't, as we discussed earlier, people are a long way from their agricultural roots. And even within the horse industry, people think looking at the horse industry, they don't distinguish. They see a horse with a big lick and they think it could be a saddlebred or it could be a Morgan. And that bad reputation is spilling over onto these other breeds. And that spillover is causing these other breeds, and it should cause every horse breed, every horse discipline, some great concern. Because again, I believe that people don't, and just general people, don't distinguish between various forms of horses and what they do. The public, the media, as has been said, I think by all 3 speakers, is watching us. I mean, there's been three New York Times articles on racing and medication, and really that's talking about race day medication and Lasix on race day, because that's the only medication used that a horse can be under the influence of. And it looks like the racing industry is moving towards a uniform position there. But there's been a New York Times article on racing, including the quarter horse racing, which I'm sure everybody saw. There's been New York Times articles on showing, on the pony that collapsed at the Devon Horse Show. There was just about 3 weeks ago a New York Times article on dog shows, and the American Kennel Club has been brought into that. And again, it's because of that media and because people don't understand exactly everything, and because there are some practices, yes, that we can have difficulty explaining. That's going to continue. But again, the AQHA and the American Horse Council have independent marketing initiatives. The AQHA, you're probably more familiar, is aimed at kids, 4 to 6 or 7. Ours, which is still not ripe, although we've got some activities going on right now, is aimed after a lot of study at mothers and daughters. And as has also been said, you bring a mother and a daughter to a horse show, and they see things that they don't like, you've lost them forever. And that's an opportunity to grow our industry that's going to go away. We don't need to be defensive, we just need to be aware. We don't need to give our critics ammunition to go after us. It's terrific that the AQHA has set up this coalition, has conducted this, and I feel I don't think but there's a real sea change in all aspects of the horse industry to deal with this welfare issue. So again, it's a difficult issue. There's a lot of media, there's a lot of people looking, but as long as we do what is best for the horse, that will take care of what is best for the horse industry. And this is what people should be doing in all parts of the industry and are. Again, we'll either have questions later, or if not, ask me anything you wish. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and present this. And I also even went back up and changed and put this, since it's Western Day, I put my Levi's on. I usually get a lot of grief from Ward and Tom and Don Treadway because they're too short, but they seem to have gotten longer, not because the pants are long, but they just seem to hang lower for some reason now. But again, this is a serious issue, and it's good to be able to talk about it. Thank you very much.